Fantastic. Rachel, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me to tear up the Good Girl script today. You have had such a rich and colourful journey of professional success. And I'm sure that along the way, you have had to tear up that Good Girl script many times. So the way I see it is that as girls, we have this innate sense of knowing, I can do that, I can achieve this. But then we also have another script that's an external one that we hear from other people around us. And it's the one that says, you shouldn't be doing that because you're a girl. So there are many, many different versions of this. It's everything from, don't laugh too loudly, or make sure that you please other people, or don't be too ambitious. So what I want to know from you is that when you were growing up, which version of the Good Girl script did you hear? What do you remember hearing as an external prohibition?
Well, I do remember in my childhood, from my mother in particular, there was a lot of shaming. And it was all around actually trying to, I always felt she was trying to suppress my energy. And she would say things like, you need to be brought down a peg or two. Because I think I was always larger than life and always I think my energy was too big. And in contemplating this Good Girl script, I think there was another very strong thing running when I was growing up and in my teens and as I came into my career world, and that was really the power woman script. And I went to an all-girls high school, grammar school in the 70s, and people like Anita, Roddick were businesswoman, a Body Shop, and Debbie Moore floating pineapple on the stock exchange, the first woman to do that. And obviously Margaret Thatcher becoming the first woman prime minister. Then we had the whole Princess Diana thing as a contrast to that. So there really was this power woman script, which I was very conscious of. And the danger of that, and the thing that I realized looking back, is that I was really pulled into my masculine energy. And I think it was a form of fight, in almost as a sort of revenge against my mother, of that, I'm going to show you, I'm going to prove you wrong. So I had all of that going on. And so when I went into business, when I was 24, and bear in mind, I grew up with 4 brothers as well. I was really, my energy was so strong, so masculine, so focused, so determined. I was a bit like a bulldozer. And I think that really stood me in good stead in business to create a multi-million turnover business.
What you raise about the voice of the mother is really important. And I'm sure I'm going to be returning to this in interviews with many people, because our mothers, our parents are always doing the best that they can. But it's so interesting how in trying to sort of mold us and shape us, very often they really do limit us. You need to be brought down a peg or two. The words really land, and they really land very deep in our awareness, and they can get lodged there. And this is what I see working with women in my coaching program for women leaders, is that these things get lodged in our consciousness, and they have a way of coming up sometimes when you don't expect them. And that's why it's so important to uproot them.
Most of my spiritual healing work over the past 10 years or so has really been uninstalling programs, like uninstalling the apps on your phone that a lot of the time you don't know are there and running. And
when we're trying to find our center as evolved women leaders, sometimes you do have to break through. Sometimes that means inhabiting a really tough bulldozer, was the word you used. So can you talk to us a bit about how you see the evolved feminine now, looking back?
Starting to really appreciate the power of the divine feminine, the power of stillness, the power of connection to all that is, and the power of magnetizing what you want as opposed to pushing and hustling. The greatest, probably one of the greatest tragedies of my life, and I hate to say this, is that I didn't realize when I was in that whole chaotic pantomime of busyness woman, I never really understood or appreciated how important it is to be a mother. And so I've got 5 sons. And so I had this elaborate network of nannies and childminders and au pairs and schools and nurseries and drivers. And it was just insane. And now I look back, I have a realization that being a mother is actually one of the most important career choices, which is there is no training for, there's no MBA for, there's no support, there's no prestige, there's no money attached to it. And it's very easy to see it as being a kind of second choice. But I realize now that actually a lot of the world's problems are because our leaders are highly traumatized boys who've grown into sociopathic men. And behind them at some point was a mother who didn't do her job properly. And exactly echoing back into my mother, not having that really nourishing, loving, supportive, encouraging of the divine feminine. That's why everything is so out of balance.
When you look back at your career so far, what would you say is the biggest obstacle that you have overcome in your professional career? And how did the Good Girl script play into your overcoming of it?
Definitely, it was the high profile failing of my business, Red Letter Days, which actually was a case of corporate muggery. If I look back, it was a corporate mugging. I lost my first business, Red Letter Days, into administration, even though it had 3.3 million cash at bank, and it was forced into administration and then taken over by my fellow dragons, Peter and Theo, sold for peanuts by the administrators to them. And of course, I'd just been on Dragon's Den, so I got a public, humiliation, shaming. And so I think coming back from that was probably the biggest thing to phoenix out of that. That happened in 2005, and 3 years later in 2008, everything crashed. And so I was a business survivor who'd experienced it and who'd survived it. So to have just written a book called Business Nightmares and to be positioned as this business survivor and to have tools and techniques, energy techniques of how to keep that hope and faith in the midst of darkness. And I feel that that's very relevant at the current time in the current year.
I think we need more women leaders. You mentioned earlier this toxic masculinity, and that is absolutely right. That is a big part of the problem, is that there is too much toxic masculinity in leadership positions. So,
absolutely.
So to help to bring forward more women leaders, what would your top 3 tips be for women who want to tear up the Good Girl script?
Feel it is more women who are operating from the divine feminine, so who are predominantly sitting in the heart rather than in the mind, to be able to see through some of the lies we're being told, and to be able to hold that vertical center point, to hold the eye of the storm. It's a very good analogy, because we are being deliberately driven into dissonance. And it is undoubtedly, this is all being constructed by, as you say, the unevolved masculine, which is all about money, power, winning, ego, and it's ruthless. And so the more women who can hold that center point, that eye of the storm, no matter how intense the chaos gets, and to be in that place, that really strong no, we do not consent, we do not accept. And we're going to envision a very different way of being on this planet, where we run this planet like a family rather than like a business. And that, in truth, is what is needed now. That is the true shift that is needed. Everyone, we create safe space for everyone. We make sure everyone's properly nourished. Hold space for the traumatized within our society, and we place an emphasis on healing rather than command and control. We empower and inspire. And I do feel that it is women in all our roles holding that evolved feminine. So that to me is, in truth, where women need to go, not into the power masculine fight, which is where I was lured into. It's a very different energy. It's invincible. And men respond to that.
Run the planet as a family. I would add that it needs to be a family that has healthy dynamics, not the usual dysfunctional dynamics that pervade most family relationships, of course. So there's that. I think that's also part of the evolution that we need, is to look again at how to create healthy family dynamics. The key thing that you said is this no, this strong no, that, you know, we will not be programmed or pushed around or deceived. That is absolutely at the heart of tearing up the good girl script. It really is about saying no to these external command and control voices, whether they've come from people in our childhood or whether they're coming from governments or other powers around us. I absolutely do believe that it is going to be evolved women who change the script for the whole planet and upgrade the script into something that is healthy, sustainable, and vibrantly flourishing.
When you understand about trauma and trauma healing, you understand about the power of boundaries. And I'm sure, well, you know this, Veena, in relationships, it does work miracles in relationships to be very clear about what behavior you will just not tolerate.
Yeah,
even if it means walking away. And I've really learned the power of that in my own, having had a child with no boundaries really, and just being kind of, you just had to fight really. So there were no safe boundaries. So that is a very important thing. And I do think a lot of women have not had that teaching of how to find that really strong no, and the power of that. Yeah.
It is the power of that, because here's the thing, healthy boundaries enable boundless loving. And I think one of the things for women is that we worry that by saying no, we are not being loving. That's one of the programs that went into us to be good girls, right?
Yes.
Whereas the truth is that healthy boundaries enable boundless loving. This is something that I found for myself and something that I teach over and over again in my coaching program. So thank you so much for bringing that up.
Because, and this is another metaphysical point, in times of despair, and I know a lot of people are in despair at the moment, it's very tempting to focus a lot of energy on what's going wrong. So whilst we need to address that, we also need to focus a lot of energy. Okay, what kind of world do we want to create? What kind of system? It's not enough just to say this system doesn't work. We need to say, okay, what do we want to create? Because there's a lot of power in visioning and shaping. And there's a lot of people speaking to the problem right now, but not many speaking to the solutions. And that is very important for us to energize that.
That's how we're going to actually make the change, rather than being stuck in wishing it were different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rachel, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you and to have you on Tearing Up the Good Girl Script.
Thanks, Veena. Thank you for inviting me. Lots of love.
Lots of love to you.